I didn't think he'd be up for the challenge, I'll be honest.
I'm like 2% excited, like 98% really scared. The son needs to hear he's loved. When Jesus heard his voice from his Father from heaven, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. That's kind of the cue to the rest of us that sons need to hear that.
The most powerful thing my dad ever said to me was, I love you, and I'm proud of what you have become, and I'll always be with you. That's the things I want to impart upon my son.
Dads need to impart the real definition of what a man is. If a dad doesn't do that for his son, the world will.
And when that goes undone, you leave a void that anger and rage fill. It's the frustration of not knowing what to do and trying to fill it by guesswork. That's good.
What are you laughing at? Huh?
I'm not laughing at you, the weights are laughing at you.
I mean, a guy's trying to get in shape,
Yeah.
and it can be overwhelming to him.
Well, it can be when you're doing it for the first time in maybe 15 years.
You know, we're trying to help dads get in shape through some exercises. And last session, you gave the men an exercise to ask their sons how they were doing. Help the men with some practical exercises to be a strategic father.
Yeah, because when you come into a gym, especially when you're out of shape like we are, there's some basic exercises you need to do. I think there are 4 for a strategic dad. There's the exercise of what a son needs to see in his dad, what a son needs to hear from his dad, what a son needs to receive from his dad, and then finally, what a son needs to experience with his dad. Those are the 4 basic exercises of strategic fatherhood.
You know, as you talked about those 4, I think about that one of what a son needs to hear from his father.
Right.
What do you think is the most important thing a son can hear?
Well, I think there are 3 things that really, when you look over the landscape of a dad's interaction with his son, there are 3 very important things. Interestingly enough, when you look into the scriptures and you see the father speaking to the son while he was here in his earthly life, the Father spoke these very same things to Jesus. I mean, here's Jesus Christ,
Right.
and the few times we have recorded in Scripture the audible voice of God, He says these 3 things to encourage His Son in His life, and that is, Son, I love you. Son, I'm proud of you. And then thirdly, Son, you're good at. I mean, He affirms him in what he's good at. So you hear it this way. The heavens open up, and the voice of God says, this is my beloved Son, I love him, in whom I'm well pleased, I'm proud of him. And then He kind of commands the people around Jesus, hear ye him. And the reason He said that is because He's good at what He says and does.
Right.
So He gets affirmed in those moments. I think those are the same 3 things a son needs to hear throughout his life from his dad. Son, I'm proud of you. Son, I love you. And son, you're good at some particular thing. And interestingly enough, one or all of those things go missing in many dads as they interact with their sons.
And you know, there's dads listening right now, and they're saying, yeah, I didn't get that from my dad. And I know that you grew up in a home where your father struggled with alcoholism.
That's right.
And there were some things you didn't receive from your father.
You know, I never heard my dad say, I love you. I knew that he did, but Dad was he was back there in the distance, emotionally closed off, not just for me, but for the other 2 sons in our family. Even though I had a great athletic career, never heard my dad say, I'm proud of you. He was at my games, but somehow that heart just couldn't crack open. And you know, even to this day, I would love to hear those words from my father. He's gone now. I'd love for him to come up out of that grave, look me square in the eye and say, Robert, I love you. But I've never heard that.
Robert, do you think we as dads underestimate how powerful those words are in our sons' lives?
Absolutely. I think a son revolves around Dad emotionally and wants a fusion.
Did you get the form?
Hey, yeah, we got to sign up to get us permission here to fall and break a leg.
And even though a dad is earning an income and helping his son, connected with his son, there's nothing more powerful than eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart, soul to soul contact, and a dad coming from the gut saying to his son, I really love you.
Yeah, you can see all the fresh snow.
We're going to have an adventure, a father-son adventure. We're going to be climbing a mountain, hopefully, and doing a little rappelling. And the whole concept is fathers and sons together, working as a team, getting up the mountain, rappelling down. It's going to be a fun experience.
Everywhere you look.
How you feel?
Good.
Little baby step. Being a father is one of the greatest joys and thrills of a man's life. It's also one of the most sobering responsibilities.
One end to the side, and then uncoil it, one coil at a time.
When your son packs up and heads off to college and seeing him with his luggage and his car leaving and driving out of sight is just a real sobering reality. Asking yourself the question as a dad, have I prepared him, not just for college, but have I prepared him for manhood? Don't get much better than this. This is good stuff.
Robert, can you help the men understand what a real man is?
You know, that is the question of the 21st century. It really is, because if you go out anywhere, churches, in society, and say, what is a man? You're going to find a person stumbling over words and saying it's kind of like, or I think it is, but there is no compelling definition of what it means to be a man or how to get there. And I think one of the critical moments that a father has with his son is authorizing him into manhood, having a moment where, son, now you become a man. Now in America today, if you start thinking about when that is, I mean, is it when you graduate from high school? Is it when you drink your first beer? Is it when you graduate from college or get a job or shoot your first deer? Or what? I mean, you have all these places that are kind of pseudo passages. Where's the real passage?
Right.
And let me tell you, Dennis, I'm absolutely convinced that the real passage is when a father has a compelling definition that he himself is living out, and he, in the company of other men, can transfer that into his son's life and welcome him into manhood.
Robert, was there, in your experience with your dad, was there either a formal or an informal experience that you still treasure today as a man who's lived more than a half century?
Sadly, no. The one thing I can remember with my dad that kind of maybe marked more of the void was when I'd signed a scholarship to play for the University of Arkansas in football, and I loaded up my car and went to embrace my dad, and he kind of backed up a little bit, and he stuck his hand out and he said, good luck. And I tell you,
Wow.
what I left with is I left with this kind of shadow hanging over me, because now I had to guess at it. I had to go into college and guess at girls, guess at studies, guess at my social life, guess with my peers. And you know what? I guessed wrong a lot. And I tell you what that built into my heart is anger and frustration, even rage. I think about what it says in Ephesians. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but raise them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. In the vacuum of instruction and substantive, strategic manhood investments in your son, what you leave is a void that anger and rage fill. That's what fills that void, because it's the frustration of not knowing what to do and trying to fill it by guesswork.
Come up, throw it over.
Got your safety, your second knot?
I'd rather be tight so I don't fall out.
We don't want that.
I'm like 98% excited, 2% scared.
I got a different percentage there. I'm like 2% excited, like 98% really scared. It has the difference with age here.
Under no.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited to be here and just being outdoors and being with him, and I just really look forward to growing my relationship with him, getting closer. Now, is it tight?
Not yet, but it's going to be.
If you fall, it comes off you. It's not going to do any good.
Thanks, Clayton. Appreciate that word of reminder there.
Well, this is going to be pretty exciting. I don't know about how he's going to handle this rock climbing, but we'll see how it goes. I'll go first just to make sure it's safe for my old man. I don't want him getting hurt. I love him, and I'm glad to be here.
Clayton,
Yes.
be careful.
Oh yeah.
I taught him early on, son, there's two things you can be sure of, that your dad loves you and your dad is proud of you. And I think he knows that. He's got a heart for adventure. Look at me, buddy. Smile for your mama. She ain't gonna believe this.
Feet wide, knees bent.
You're looking good, Fuzz. You've got to be proactive. I don't think you need to wait till your guys grow up and realize, man, we could have. You've got to plan. You got to put on the calendar. You got to get some intentional time away from the everyday pressures of life, but also you got to grab some moments in the routine of life to be with your son. You're young only once, but you can be immature forever. And I've kind of, I think realized with fatherhood comes a new awakening for men. It's time for us to grow up and be responsible to prepare our sons. Maybe your dad didn't do it exactly right, but you're responsible to kind of self-assess yourself as you go through the journey. Maybe communicate with your son, your daughter, and ask along the way, how am I doing? Be honest and say, I could do better in this area, and work on it. Be focused, be intentional.
That was great.
I'm a gentleman. I'll let somebody else go ahead of me if they want to. Flipped over here.
Locked.
Locked. If I had probably known the specific details of what we were doing, I wouldn't have done it. But once I got up there, I had to go through with it. I'm kind of speechless now.
Well, it was by far probably one of the most exciting, adventurous / dangerous things I've ever done. I didn't think he'd be up for the challenge, first off, I'll be honest. I mean, he's been working out a lot for the past few weeks, but I didn't know what to expect from him, but he stuck with it and handled it perfectly, and I'm really proud of him for sticking with it.
We've kind of moved up a notch. I think this has been just good bonding time. I think every night after we come back to our cabin, we've been tired, but we've talked. And this has really been a step up for us. Just like life, you need some training and preparation or you're gonna hurt yourself. And it's good to have a guide, which is what fatherhood's all about. Hey man, way to go.
Dads need to impart the real definition of what a man is.
That's right.
If a dad doesn't do that for his son, the world will.
Right. And I really believe that there are a lot of men even watching and interacting with us that are probably sitting there just as we broach that subject and are saying in their hearts, I wish they'd go ahead and tell us what the definition is, because they themselves are still what I call men in waiting. They're waiting for somebody to both tell them what a man is and then have some kind of moment where they can go, today I became a man.
What would you tell your son a man is in your own words?
Boy, there's your answer, right? You got to think about it for a long time.
I think one of the things I would say, a real man does the right thing when nobody's watching.
A real man not only does the right thing when nobody's watching, but he has the confidence to follow his beliefs in spite of the environment around him.
I don't know. I'd have a hard time describing it in my own words, but not to over spiritualize, but if I'm living by God's word, I'd like to think that a real man would exude those qualities or the fruits of the Spirit that the Bible talks about, that he'd have love and he'd have joy and he'd have peace. He'd be a man of patience and he'd be kind and he'd be gentle and he'd have self-control and he'd be a good man.
I would think I'd want my son to keep it simple and say, you know, what would Jesus do? And that they would keep the right thing, and they would have that internal compass. But then again, we all fall short. So it'd be very difficult saying, okay, now you're a man, because there's times when we get together, we certainly don't act like men. So, guys, what was the most powerful thing your dad ever said to you?
I don't know if I can recall something that totally impacted me from what my dad said. It's interesting, too, because after he got remarried and he had kids, they would tell us of things that he would say about us that would make me feel good. Like, why can't you be more like Michael, or things of that effect? But I don't think he has ever directly really had a heartfelt conversation with me.
The most powerful thing my dad ever said to me sticks with me to this day, and that is, I want you to know that I love you, and I'm proud of what you have become, and I don't want you to quit school, and you have to follow your dreams, and I'll always be with you, whether I'm on earth or in heaven. I'll always be with you. And that sits with me every day. That's the thing that I want to impart upon my son.
Well, my dad died when I was 15. You know, I don't recall a lot of that part of my life, unfortunately. But I had no doubt that he loved me. I had a great dad, but he didn't say it. And I don't think that generation said it. It makes me realize how impactful I can be on my sons when I do tell them I love them. And I look them straight in the eye and say, and not just I love you, which happens too, but say, man, I am proud of you and I love you unconditionally. And that's what I wish I would have received. And but I did, again, see it and feel it. I just didn't hear it.
We've been talking about what a son needs to receive, or what a son needs to hear, what he needs to see, and those kind of things. And those kind of things seem maybe a little random to our viewers right now, and it can be very overwhelming. But what I want them to know and be encouraged by is that we're going to take all the things we've talked about here, and we're going to put them on a workout program next week. When you begin to think the way we're going to be talking and make those strategic investments, it actually enriches your language and your informal connections with your son, and you're going to find a dad just naturally going further than he ever imagined himself going before. And in those close one-on-one encounters that he has with his son, where he's talking heart to heart because he's learning how to do that and soul to soul, he's going to build in us some incredible memories. Memories that for a son, even after his dad goes away, those memories almost become mythic moments where he looks back and in his own life he remembers his dad building into his life and doing things with him as a son that strengthen and empower him to stay the course in his own life. That's what strategic manhood does. It builds a man from a son for a lifetime. So Dennis, are you ready to get into strategic fatherhood?
I am.
All right, let's start lifting that weight, man.
All
you
right,
can build
let's
those
go.
muscles.
Put some more weight. Put some more weight
Go
on there.
for it, push.
Don't laugh.
One of the things that my dad used to do is when he came to my football games, I could hear him cheering me on in the stands. He would always nudge his buddy, "That's my boy, that's my boy." And he'd love it when my name was called. And that really gave me a feeling that he was in my corner all the time. And as a father, that is absolutely what I want my son to know. I'm in your corner, and I'm always encouraging you. And if my son feels that way, the way my dad made me feel, boy, I tell you, I'm about 80% where I need to be.
Hey, let's finish session 2 by answering this question. What was the most meaningful moment you've ever had with your son? And as you answer that with the other men in the group, why don't you tell why you think it was the most meaningful moment? Sometimes it's good for us to reflect back, think about how we bonded with our son in the past, and sometimes it gives us a hint on how we can have more of those kind of moments in the future. Here's the dad challenge for this week. Take just a couple of moments and sit down and think, maybe even write out, what are some of the things that you're really proud of your son for? Think about character traits in particular. Maybe it's his work ethic. Maybe it's his loyalty. Maybe it's his integrity and character. It's maybe the way he's got certain skills that he's worked hard to develop. But think about those things. And then here's the challenge. Sometime during this week, I want you to draw up close to your son and brag on him. You can do that in public, you can do that in a private setting, but at least brag on him one moment this week.
The one thing that I can tell you right now is the most important characteristic that you're good at is your kindness and your gentleness. And so that character trait is going to take you far into the future.
Just say out loud, son, I've watched you and you're really good at this. You really have this kind of characteristic. And then finish it by saying, son, I want you to know, I'm really proud of you. And then if you really want to take the dad challenge, after you tell him that, draw up real close and look him in the eye and say, and son, I love you.
And I want you to know I love you, and I'll always be on your side. Okay, buddy?
You guys ready for that? We'll see you next week.